Hello and welcome to the Podcast Engineering Show. My name is Chris Curran. I produce podcasts, and I also teach at Podcast Engineering School. And on this show, I interview podcasters and producers about their production. We get really technical. We go really deep into the audio production, recording, mixing, editing, mastering, everything. And alternately, I put out these daily Goody episodes, which this is one of them. And this is where I'm going to talk about 9 or 10 of the daily Goody blog posts that I write about 3 times per week. So they're just little tidbits of good information. It's kind of like if you subscribe to the email list, you can get the daily goodies via email. And it's kind of like learning little bits of audio production week by week, year by year, and all that knowledge adds up, and it's really, really helpful. So if you're into that, go ahead and go to the website and sign up for the email list. It's podcastengineeringschool.com. And the next semester of Podcast Engineering School starts on April 20th, 2021. April 20th, that's the next one. We're actually in the middle of a semester right now, which is going really well. And I have a couple announcements, but I'll give them at the end. So the daily goodies we're going to cover are from October 2nd through October 21st. So let's get into it. The first one is remind guests to stay on after the interview ends. This is just a really good, simple practice. So before you even start recording the episode, make sure you remind the guest that, okay, at the end of the episode, don't just disconnect. Stay on, and we're going to just chat for a minute or two. And the main reason you want to do this is because if you're using services like Squadcast or Zencastr, which record your guests locally on their computer and then sort of upload the audio in the background, and by the way, that's like probably the highest possible quality recording you can get in the world of podcasting is to use something like Squadcast or Zencastr. But what happens is sometimes the host will end the interview and will say something like, hey, Joe, thanks for coming on the show. And Joe will say, hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And then the host will go into their outro. They'll be like, okay, thank you for listening to the XYZ show. Don't forget, the website is XYZ. Like, the host will start giving all the outro information. And sometimes what the guest will do is they'll literally just disconnect. I don't know why guests do this. I almost think it's kind of rude. Like, if I'm a guest on a show, I'm going to stay on until the end, and then I'm going to thank the host and make sure the host has everything they need before I disconnect. But believe it or not, some people, like, literally, as soon as they say, hey, thanks for having me on the show, they literally just disconnect. And it doesn't happen often, but it does. So anyway, the point is, make sure you remind people to stay on afterwards. Now, if you are just recording with like Skype or Zoom and you're just recording the conversation locally yourself, then it doesn't matter. Because then the guest can, what you're recording is the guest's VoIP signal that's coming over the internet, and you're recording that locally. So as soon as they say, all right, thanks for having me on, I really appreciate it. Like, as soon as they say that, you've already recorded it locally. And so if they do disconnect immediately, it doesn't matter. So the only time it really matters is if you're using services like Squadcast and Zencastr, which I hope you're using them instead of Zoom and Skype, because Zoom and Skype are horrendous. So anyway, just remind your guests to stay on at the end. So it's just a good practice to do, and it'll avoid a bunch of headaches. Because I've actually had sessions where the guests literally, as soon as they said thanks for having me, they jumped off, they disconnected, and then what happens is you can lose like the last 30 seconds or 1 minute of their audio. So, and that happened. Like, the last minute and a half of the guest's audio was missing. And the only way, you know how you have to get it? Do you know? You have to get the guest to reconnect through Squadcast or Zencastr to reconnect to the same session, and then you kind of have to, click a button within the platform to have it sort of upload their audio again. So it's a real pain. There was one older guest, one older gentleman who was on a show, and he disconnected early. And for me to get that, first of all, even to get in touch with the guy was almost impossible. And then getting him to actually go back to the link, and it was literally a nightmare. And we didn't do it. He couldn't do it. He literally couldn't reconnect again because he was old and he was a Luddite. He just technologically challenged as far as just a simple web browser and link, which is fine. I don't hold that against anybody, but the point is it does happen. So, okay, enough of that. Next daily goodie. Advice for speaking into a lavalier microphone. Okay, this is actually a question someone sent me. They said, hey, do you have any advice for speaking into a lavalier microphone? And I basically just had a simple reply. So this was my reply. I'll read it. Clip it to yourself as close to your mouth as possible and make sure it doesn't rub against your clothing, causing nasty scratching sounds, which you will not be able to remove later. Also, if the mic has a directional pickup pattern, be sure to aim the mic at your mouth. So those are three things. Make sure you clip it as close to your mouth as possible, meaning don't put it like down near your stomach on your shirt. Like put it up near your neck, up near your collar or something. Put it as close to your mouth as you can get it because that increases the signal to noise ratio. And also make sure it doesn't rub against your shirt and all that. Usually that's not a problem, but you just have to make sure. And then also, if it is a cardioid pattern, which is directional, make sure you aim the mic like up towards your mouth. You don't want it pointing to the side or anything. But most lavalier mics are actually omnidirectional pickup patterns, so they pick up sound from all directions equally. So if it is an omnidirectional lavalier mic, then it actually doesn't matter what direction it's facing because it picks up sound from every direction equally. So, all right, let's go to the next daily goodie. Oh, this one is the Zoom PodTrack P8. Oh my God, the podcasting world went crazy again over another hardware multi-track recorder for podcasting. Wow. Yeah, the Zoom PodTrack P8. So it's essentially Zoom's answer to the Rodecaster Pro. And you're probably familiar with the Rodecaster Pro. It's a great little unit. And the PodTrack P8 is very similar. But the great Daniel J. Lewis pointed out some details, some differences. He said the Zoom PodTrack P8 has several things the Rodecaster Pro does not have, like a de-esser, built-in editing, more inputs and headphone outputs, and AA battery powering. And he also notes that it outputs to USB only as stereo, but it does record in multitrack. So that means on the unit itself, it'll record multitrack, but it'll only send a stereo signal to your computer, which that's different because the Rodecaster Pro can record multitrack in both places, I believe. I think one of the big differences is the AA battery powering. That's kind of cool. So literally you could take this PodTrack P8 anywhere. You could take it out, 10 miles into the woods and record multitrack if you wanted to. Yeah, and also, I'm sure that the Rodecaster Pro has features that the PodTrack P8 does not have, right? So I'm sure the Rodecaster Pro has things that the P8 doesn't, but I don't know what they are because I don't have either one. So anyway, on to the next daily goodie, which is the Hook Lav. So speaking of lavalier microphones, this is the Hook Lav, and Hook is the name of the company, and it's spelled Hooke. It's called the Hook Lav, and it was a Kickstarter campaign that I don't know if it's over, but the Hook Lav, it's a little lavalier microphone that I believe it can connect to your phone via Bluetooth, and it also records on the little microphone itself. So it's an interesting form factor. It's like a little circle that you just sort of clip onto your clothing somewhere, and it records on board. So like you don't even have to connect it Bluetooth. You could just literally clip it to your collar and then just hit record and then just talk, and it'll just record onto the Hook Lav itself, which is really cool. Apparently, it's coming out in April of 2021. So, and I contributed to the Kickstarter campaign, so I will receive a Hook Lav, hopefully in April 2021. And the great Alan Tepper wrote an article about it, which I linked to in the Daily Goodie. Oh, I forgot to mention that. All the Daily Goodies that I'm talking about, I will link to them in the show notes, so you can just click through to each one very easily. Okay, but Alan Tepper was happy because it has 48 kilohertz sampling rate. Oh yeah, baby. The 48 kilohertz Alliance in the house. And beyond that, it uses 24-bit resolution, which is really high resolution, really good to capture audio at 24-bit. And apparently it also has zero latency to avoid lip sync issues, because I guess you can use this Bluetooth. I should have looked this up before I started recording, but I think it connects Bluetooth. It must. But apparently there's zero latency, which, I don't know, doesn't Bluetooth cause a little bit of latency? Anyway, you can click through the link and look into it more if you want. I plan on just clipping it to my collar or clipping it to myself somewhere and recording audio, because there's a lot of times, for instance, when I'm in discussions with certain people, or when I'm in a meetup group and I share something in a meetup group, like a lot of times I'll share something and then I'll be like, wow, I gave a lot of interesting information. I wish I recorded that. So, but anyway, those are my ideas of how I might use it. I actually don't know how I'm going to use it. Well, I will do that because that's actually why I bought it. But okay, so that's the Hook Lav. Looks pretty cool. Let's move on to the next Daily Goodie, which is trivia. What compression ratio do I use on my channel strip on the way to tape? So as you know, you might know, I use a channel strip. I plug my mic into a channel strip, which has obviously a mic preamp and an EQ and a compressor and a couple other things which I don't use. But so I do compress my voice during the recording process, which means to tape. And so the trivia question is, what compression ratio do I use? And your choices are 1.6 to 1, 2.3 to 1, 3 to 1, 4 to 1, 6.5 to 1, or 8 to 1. And if you know what the higher the ratio, basically the more compression that happens. So, all right, so I'll just give you the answer because this is a while ago, and Mike Thomas answered, Brian Ensminger answered, and Jamie Ritchie also answered. Hey, Jamie. And so the answer is 2.3 to 1. That's the ratio I use on the compressor. So that's pretty gentle compression, and that's the idea. I don't want to compress it a lot. I just want to compress it a little, because I also compress it more in post-production, but in the recording process, I like to compress it a little. Plus, the channel strip that I have is a really expensive and awesome channel strip, like really expensive, like $3,300. So the compressor, it just sounds great. So that's why I use it. And, it's an investment, and that's why I use it. So anyway, 2.3 to 1, that's the answer. Next Daily Goodie. Oh, this is a classic age-old question in audio production, right? Should I EQ and then compress? Or should I compress and then EQ? It's a great question. Now, in most scenarios, it's not going to make a huge difference if you EQ first or you compress first, right? But there are a few scenarios, or especially one, that you should definitely EQ first, and that is if the raw recording needs a lot of drastic EQing. Like maybe it has a lot of low end. Like maybe it's a Skype call and there's no clarity and there's a ton of low end, right? You would probably want to EQ out a bunch of the low mids and low end and then compress the audio. And by the way, Skype was a bad example because they compress it and destroy the signal so much that you probably don't want to compress a Skype signal any more than it already is. So that's actually a bad example. So anyway, but the point is, if the raw recording needs drastic EQing, then I would EQ it first and then send that to the compressor. So then the compressor will be acting upon a more normal, balanced signal. So that's it. And so if there's a recording, it already sounds good, pretty good, then it doesn't really matter what order you use it in. I mean, there is a slight difference. Don't get me wrong. Like, for all the audio engineers listening, yes, I realize there's a difference, and it does make a difference. But for podcast production, where you're not doing anything really, really extreme, it's not that big of a deal. But I do encourage you to try it both ways. Try it both ways. Try EQing it first and then compressing it, listen, and then swap the order and listen, and then swap back, listen, and then swap back and listen. And then one thing you can do too is when you have the EQ first, like just add like a lot of low end to the EQ, and that'll feed into the compressor, and then you'll hear what that does to the compression. And then do the opposite. Remove a bunch of the low end and then see how that sounds through the compressor. Because the compressor will react differently. Like if you EQ the signal before the compressor is going to react differently because the signal is different, right? So anyway, it's a good thing to mess around with. I mean, even if you just messed around for a half an hour, like you would learn so much, and your ears would be trained a lot. That'd be a real good training session. So anyway, I encourage you to play with that. All right, the next post is the 200th episode celebration episode. I don't know if you heard the 200th, but that was really awesome. The next daily goodie: should you edit a boring speaker differently than an exciting speaker? Right? Some podcast guests are really slow, and they don't bring the energy, really. They don't bring it. They don't bring the energy. And then you have other people who, like me, actually, I'm one of these people, who bring the energy. And so the point is, should you edit those two participants differently? And so here's my thinking. If the participant is slow and boring and not energetic, you should edit their audio a little more tighter, a little tighter. Yeah, I can speak. You should edit it tighter, meaning edit it a little more, tighten it up, because that'll actually sort of increase the pacing a little bit. And so the listener, you won't drive the listener up the wall as much, because if they're a slow speaker, if you just tighten them up a little, it'll improve the pace and it'll just be better for everybody. However, if the participant is really energetic, then you might not want to edit it tighter. Just maybe not edit it very much, because they're already bringing the energy and coming at it at a faster pace. So those were my thoughts. And so what are your thoughts? That's the question. Did anyone comment on this post? Oh, yeah. Tom Moscato says, Chris, thanks for being so generous with your knowledge. I've been listening to you for over a year, and I can't count the number of times you helped me master my indie podcast. Oh, he didn't even mention what we're talking about. But thank you, Tim. And Mike Thomas says, another trick that I've found can help is to speed up the track by a small amount. Don't increase the frequency so they sound like chipmunks, but just enough to tighten it up. Yeah, that's one way to do it. You could speed up the overall. You could speed up the pace of the playback speed, basically. But yeah, you just got to make sure you pitch adjust so they don't sound like chipmunks. And I've only done that a few times, and it can, in some cases it can work, but I've actually tried it in a few cases, and it didn't seem to work as well. So just be careful with that. Yeah, so thanks, Mike. And so anyway, and just for reference, I want to just clarify what I mean by editing something tighter. I want to clarify that a little more. So to me, editing something tighter, and that's my word, okay? So if you have a different word, let me know, please. But editing something tighter means removing more blank space, right? And removing more unnecessary filler words. And ums and potentially removing sections where the host where the person repeats themselves or restates something. So basically you just want to clean it up more and tighten it up to make the pacing seem faster. Well, and really it is faster. Whereas editing looser means leaving in the blank space, leaving in some or all of the filler words, and maybe even leaving in sections where the person repeats themselves or restates something quickly, right? Like, so anyway, those are my thoughts on that. If you do have thoughts, you can comment on the post. The next daily goodie is Metadata. Metadata. Okay, this is an metadata editor for Mac. It's called Metadata, and as I mentioned, the link is in the description. Anyway, this is an app to tag your MP3 files with metadata, right? So most people use ID3 editor or Fission or Hindenburg or Auphonic, or maybe some people even still use the old iTunes application on their Mac to tag their MP3s. But anyway, this Metadata, I've never used it, but I heard about it and it looked pretty cool. Personally, I use ID3 editor to tag MP3s, and for this show, my show that you're listening to, I publish it as an M4A file, and I tag it in Fission by Rogue Amoeba. So that's what I use to tag. And anyway, the link is here. And so I do want to mention too that there are people these days that argue that there's no need to tag your MP3 files with metadata, because most of the podcatchers, the podcast apps that people listen to podcasts on, most of those, they don't take the metadata from the MP3 file itself. They take it from the RSS feed, I think. Yeah, so some people argue that, you don't even need to tag MP3s anymore. But I completely disagree with that. I think doing it the professional way, dotting all your I's, crossing all your T's, just do it the right way. And that's always the best way to do it. Because if someone downloads, there are people who download the MP3 file, right? And play it on their computer or play it somewhere else. There are people who do that. So at least for those few people, if the MP3 is tagged with metadata, then they can see all the metadata. They can see the title of the episode, for instance, right? I mean, simple thing like that. It's like, so just tag your files. That's my advice. If you're one of those people who doesn't think you need to tag anything, I mean, whatever, do what you want, but I recommend doing it. It reminds me of someone who, in the past, it was a long time ago now, maybe eight or 10 years ago. It was some young kid who told me that email is going away because everyone's just going to message each other on Facebook and Twitter. Yeah, you're not even going to need email anymore. So my point is that a lot of people have opinions about things, and that's fine. But as far as you and I are concerned, let's just be professionals. Let's just do things the right way. There's an idea. Then you could sleep better at night too, right? There's never going to be a problem. All right, I think this is the last daily goodie we're going to cover right now. And yes, it is. It's called Podcast Editors. Beware of negotiating your price down. Yeah, beware of negotiating your price down. I mean, have you ever had a client or a potential client ask you to reduce your price? How did you handle that? So in the beginning, if you're just starting out as a podcast editor or producer, it's really easy to just drop your price to get that client. And for the first one or two, totally understandable, right? But in the long run, it may frustrate you a lot if you keep dropping your price. It's going to frustrate you because you're not going to be earning what you should be earning. So be very, very careful. Beware. That's what I titled it, right? Because it's all in your head too, by the way, what you charge and what you're worth. It's literally all in your head. I bet if you have clients now, there are some of the clients you have right now that if you quoted them a price that's double what you quoted them, they would have still said yes. So you could be making twice what you're earning for doing no more work, for doing the same amount of work. So just be aware of that. And, one of the benefits of sticking to your guns, which I discuss in the smaller course that I published about 4 or 5 months ago, the small course is called Getting New Clients at Higher Rates, is that you'll earn more and work less, and you'll be happier. So beware of negotiating your price down. I mean, again, do what you got to do and, grow at your own pace. But all I have to say is, like, if you're learning how to produce audio professionally, you should not be working for a cheap price. You should not be charging people too little. There's too many people now who want to do podcasts. There's so much money out there to be made. That's what I talk about in the small course too, is, it's named Getting New Clients at Higher Rates, because anyway, I go through the whole process. So, all right, well, that's the last Daily Goodie. I have 2 announcements. First, before that, I want to say thank you. I appreciate you listening, and I hope you get a lot out of these episodes and my interviews and all that. There's producing audio is something that I'm good at and I have a lot of experience in, and I'm really happy to be able to share a lot of this with you guys, and I hope that you use it to create a better life for yourself, and of course sound a lot better. So first announcement is that I am going to be deleting my Facebook account, and I meant to do it a couple days ago, but right before I was going to delete it, I apparently with Facebook, you can ask them to send you a complete backup of all your data, all your posts and comments, like everything. So I asked Facebook to do that, and apparently I've been on Facebook since like 2007. So they said, it might take a couple days to send you the backup of everything. Like I think the images, videos, like everything, they're going to send everything, which is cool. But then, so I have to wait before I delete my account. And so the Podcast Engineering School page, which is on Facebook, I don't think that's going to survive because it's connected to me. So that page might just go away. And but I did start a couple Facebook groups that should remain active. One of them is the Podcasters Lounge, and there are several other administrators for that group. So I'm hoping that when I leave Facebook with my personal account, that group will keep going. And it's a really nice group. So I urge you to join that group and be active and help people, and don't spam and promote your own garbage. Don't do it. Okay. And the other group that I think will live on is a meditation group that my wife and I started called Pause Your Life, as in press the pause button. And we meditate, we do live stream meditations. I think that will also survive my leaving, and because there are a couple other administrators there, but I don't think I'll be able to stream the meditations there anymore. But that's also a good group. Just really, it's about, meditation and deeper spiritual stuff. So I will put links in the show notes to these 2 groups if you want to look at them or join or whatever, or even just see if they're still there out of curiosity. So I want to say regarding Facebook, I did write a goodbye post, and I'm thankful to all the people who, commented on that and, really felt my message of what I wrote in that post. So thank you all. And just FYI, I'm not going to comment here on why I'm leaving Facebook and other platforms as well. But obviously I have my reasons and I have my principles. So, okay. And the second announcement is that I started a community on locals.com. So locals.com is a newer platform. It's for creators. And so I started a group there. It's called Podcast Production. And I will link to that in the show notes as well. So it's on locals.com, Podcast Production. And apparently the way the platform works is like this. If you just go get a free account on Locals, you'll be able to see my free content, but you will not be able to see any paid content that I post. So, and my plan is to post both. I'm going to post a bunch of free stuff, and then I'll post some stuff that is behind a paywall, basically. But here's the thing, which I didn't realize this when I signed up for Locals. For you to be able to comment on any of my posts there, even the free posts, just to be able to comment, you actually need to, support me with at least $2 per month. So you have to kind of like subscribe for $2 per month or more to even be able to comment, which, okay, I get it, but that's, kind of stinks because it'd be nice if you could just go there and comment. But I don't know. I understand it, I guess. And I don't know. And maybe if you go there and look at what I'm posting and then if you think it's worth $2 a month, then, maybe do that. But, whatever you want. So what I'm going to be publishing over there are short videos where I screen share and talk you through various production processes, including recording, cleanup, mixing tricks, plugins, and a bunch of other tips. As well as I'll be posting personal messages from pertaining to the business of podcast production. So the business stuff. And it's going to, the group is called Podcast Production. So anyway, the URL is in the show notes, and there's a bunch of podcasters that are already on Locals and connected with me, including Eric Hunley, Brian Ensminger, Mike Wilkerson, Daryl Darnell, Bandrew Scott, Ross Brand, Roy Stegman, Heather Welch, hi Heather, Daniel Abendroth, the mighty Ed Sullivan, Leslie Martin, Paul, you know who, Jason Sheasley, Jason Bryant, and Carrie Caulfield Eric, and John Buchanan. So great to see all of you over there. And I don't know. Anyway, whatever. The link's there. If you want to check it out, fine. You know me. Do whatever you want. I'm happy to be here and help. So, all right, I'll be back in a week or two. Like I mentioned, I may for the next few months publish an episode every other week. So just, I know you have plenty of life to live outside of this show. So anyway, but also send me a note if you want to say hi, if you're listening, and if you've never sent me a note before, just send me a note and be like, hi, Chris, how you doing? What's up? Thanks for doing the show or whatever. If you have a question or a comment, and I don't know, I like to hear from you guys. Sometimes it gets I feel really isolated because I put out all this content and I know there's a bunch of people downloading it, but I never hear from you. So, there are those days when you're like, I don't know, man, is anybody hearing this? Anyway, thanks everybody. Rock on until next time. See ya.